Years later. What? They find the vault, and they find Germain. Hey, Boney. What are we doing there? What? Why? Why this scene? Right, credits. There we go. Let's let them all go through. So I kind of had a bit of. I've already kind of taken my thing about the modern day plot. The modern day plot just seems rather pointless.
My God, I don't believe what I'm seeing. I won this fight 2 centuries before it started. Well done, kid. I don't think Abstergo will bother searching the catacombs for Germain's body. The bones are going to be too damaged, too decayed. We're in the clear at this stage. You did good work, Initiate. Until we contact you again, the best you can do is continue searching Arnold's memories for anything else he might have seen. Like rare historical data, more DNA samples, anything to help our cause. We'll be in touch when we need you. Count on it.
But were we looking for the Sage's body? I don't remember that being a thing, but I might be wrong. Or was it the Templars were using it? We're trying to use this to find the Templar's body, the Sage's body, and they were trying to kind of manipulate things. I think this is the problem. Like we had very rare interaction with the modern story in this, and so it's this really weird thing that I don't fully understand, which is rather frustrating. Should I comment on what he said at the end? I'm not sure I saw I saw the point of that last little thing talking about, oh yeah, there's nothing and there's no judge and we are just redeemers and whatever and we try and follow our thing and I'm not sure I saw the point of having him make a big deal of there being no supreme being in judgment over everyone. Like that doesn't seem to have come from anywhere. That he's made that decision. It doesn't seem to have been represented in the story. Although I'm not sure how you'd represent it in the story. To be fair, I think there are a lot of points in this where I'll rant about the controls for a little bit. I kind of like the idea of being able to control when you're kind of parkouring, whether you go up or down. I just don't think it worked well. There were times when I was parkouring up where he'd drop down. Times where I was parkouring down where I'd go up a step or a couple of steps rather than go down if there was a down path. So I think there were a few points where it was kind of Stefan Pun, best surname ever, and if only there was someone with the surname Hat. That'd be brilliant. Hat Pun. That'd be the best name ever. But so the controls were they seemed worse than in previous times. It seems to have also kind of gone back to the kind of 2 era of setting. Especially with the fact that 4 and Rogue was so interesting because they were a completely separate thing because they were using the boats and the ships. So it had that kind of difference to it, where this game didn't really seem to have anything really different to kind of set it apart from the other games, other than we're in France, we're in Paris, woo, vive la France, etc. So I think setting was a bit weird. Controls were rubbish. Plot. What was the plot? Like, so we started off. Our dad has been killed by Shay, as we found out at the end of Rogue. We then got to... we then kind of were raised by the Grandmaster of the Templars. We mess up delivering a message and get accused of killing him for whatever reason. And which kind of makes sense. Then we join the Assassins, who don't really seem to like us because we were raised by a Templar. And I think they could have played more with... if it hadn't been the Templars who killed de la Serre, I think they could have been... The plot could have been a bit more interesting in... Does Arno side with the Assassins because he's an assassin, these are his people? Or does he side with the Templars because he was raised by... what was his name? What was de la Serre's surname? Monsieur de la Serre. And Elise de la Serre. That the relationships he has there, like, is he drawn... Like, what's his decision going to be? Basically, I wanted more Rogue. And kind of have that decision, like... And maybe have Elise in the same position where both of them are kind of... we want to have this relationship here. We also want to have this relationship here. We want to connect to our identity, but we care for this other person. So have them be torn between their identity. And kind of have that... Because they seem to have had that not all Templars are bad people. You had that in Rogue. I mean, admittedly, this came out at the same time as Rogue, so having that kind of same dilemma, almost, is probably not great. Because you're basically kind of doing the same story at the same time, which probably wouldn't work as well. There didn't seem to actually be a lot of the historical context around. I think we had a couple of events, like the execution of the king. Did we have the storming of the Bastille? I don't think so. I think we just escaped from the Bastille. So there's a few... The very little history attached to it, where if you look at, like, 3, that was dripping in the history. You met so many characters from it. We didn't seem to meet that many people connected to the revolution, as far as I'm aware. I know we met Napoleon, we met Robespierre, the Sade. That's 3 off the top of my head. In 3, we met Washington, Franklin, Lee, who was one of the people we killed. Okay, I've run out of ideas. Okay, I've run out of people off the top of my head, so maybe it's not as bad. But it's like, if you think about these events, you had a couple of the, I think a couple of the battles were done. I think it was like Battle of Lexington, no, Battle of Concord, or was it Lexington? That was represented. You had, I think, the signing of the Declaration of Independence. You had several of the Congresses were used. Were kind of we appear. My voice is going. I've been talking for too long. They're gone. They were gone. Then they were done or referenced. We had, I think, was it the Siege of New York? Was that covered when it? I know certainly. I think we were under the British were attacking the Americans, and Connor was involved there. I think that happened a couple of times. We met Lafayette, of course. That puts us to 4. And so there were a few issues where it seems like there was a lot more history in that one than there was in this one, especially with such, I would probably say, such an important and influential period in European history. It led to the Napoleonic era, which was one of the times when Poland existed. They created, I think, was it the Grand Duchy of Warsaw? It caused the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire, the Napoleonic Wars, which led indirectly towards the War of 1812. All these different things came from Napoleon, which resulted in this. The fact that the Napoleonic War kind of was such a powerful influence and kind of actually brought basically everyone else together, all the other countries together, meant that there hadn't been, for Britain, there hadn't been enough. Well, the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire caused kind of pan-Germanic feeling to rise, so therefore the creation of a German Empire was on its way, which happened towards the end of the 19th century, which then led to the World War I, which led to World War II. The kind of pseudo-appeasement that happened before World War I of Britain kind of not really wanting to get involved, but kind of getting involved, but not really wanting to, was because Britain hadn't been at war for 100 years since Napoleon, at least in Europe, which led to that. The peace that it caused increased kind of imperialism. So all of these events basically are a result of this moment, these moments, this period, the French Revolution, and we didn't seem to read that much of the history. I think then you get to the kind of jumping around things, like, oh, there's a thing going on, like that feels like that was the time when they would have had modern day plot happening in the other games, but they didn't in this one because I mean, instead of having Napoleon appear at the end, why not have it be that the assassins are looking for the body of the sage as much as the Templars are, for whatever reason, and so we're helping with them. Or you could create another modern day character to replace Desmond, who died at the end of 3. And if you've gotten this far, you probably already know that, so I'm not bothered about spoiling it. Either you've played the game or you've watched my Let's Play of it. If not, oops. So, they could have done something with that, like we're going to these catacombs to try and find the body, and you have that the little mentioned thing we have at the end is like, there are so many bodies, there's no way we can find it, but there's also no way that the Templars can find the body. More importantly to me, in my head, the Sword of Eden is a piece of Eden. I think that's probably something we'd like to know where it is. So there's all the kind of different ideas that I think that this is the frustrating thing from a story perspective with quite a few of these games, is there are so many ideas that are left unexplored. I mean, for example, Marie Antoinette. Oh, that was in a multiplayer mission. Oh, boo! Boo! Why are you hiding things behind multiplayer? It's a stupid idea. Who are you, EA? Oh, thank you, so I'm close to the end. Oh, maybe not. Ubisoft Music. Like with 3, as I will regularly complain about, in 3, you could have almost split that into 2 games. One where you played as Hatham for a bit, and then the next one where you played as Connor. You could reveal earlier, you could still reveal at the same point that Hatham is a Templar and build on from there, or you could end with him revealing he's a Templar, and then that leads into the next game. So there's all kinds of different things that you could have done. In this one, I think it's a failing in the modern game, the modern stories. Although, having said that, I kind of liked the ideas. I kind of liked the kind of jumping portals things. No, that's a lie. I liked one of them. I liked the World War II one. And the reason for that was because I quite liked the that era. Most of the times when we look at World War II, we see it from the perspective of the Germans, the Russians, the Americans, the British, and that's it. And to that extent, in that sense, we see a lot more. We see it from almost a strategic perspective. We see the French government surrendering to Germany, and that's what France does during World War II. I think it'd be really interesting to kind of explore it, in an Assassin's Creed game, to explore the French resistance. Because while the French government surrendered, the French people didn't. They kept fighting. And I think that'd be interesting just to kind of look at and point at. Actually, it would have been very difficult for the Western Allies to have done as well as they did had it not been for the French resistance. Says the British guy. I should probably loudly slurp some tea, which is a gross breach of etiquette, but would prove I'm still British. After praising the French. So I think that'd be an interesting thing to go down. But we just have this kind of... I mean, what's the point of setting this in history if you're not kind of almost going to seep the game in it? Because I think for historical events, how many did we actually have? I mean, yes, I'm going back to that point. It's those kind of missing, kind of the ideas that are there and they just aren't pushed. They aren't utilised as much as maybe they could be or should be. It's kind of the frustration. Still localising. Okay. So I think for me there's a few of those issues in kind of the story and the ideas just not being used. The controls are I'm kind of going around. Characters. Arno, I quite like in some ways. He's I think in some ways he never really he ends with this lesson that he hasn't learned. Oh yeah, we have to be the redeemers. You can't be ideals become dogma, become fanaticism. And the key charge against him by the assassins and why they removed him from the order was basically that he was too dogmatic and fanatical, because he went after all these people to try and find out why de la Serre was killed, to try and clear his name. That was my controller switching off, because I'm not actually using it. And I think... Move that away. Move the cursor away. And I think having that is an interesting point, but I think that should have happened earlier, and you almost try and prove yourself. Why not have that happen? Why not have it happen early on, and then something happens, and then some things happen, you play a little bit more of the game, maybe a sequence or two, and then you get contacted by one of the assassins, and they announce that Mirabeau's been killed. And they can't trust any one of the assassins because the assassins could have done it. They're not sure. And so they ask you to do it, and that's the reason why they bring you on. Or it could be that the two of you work together because she's not so sure about you. I'm saying she, like it's the female kind of person who basically took over from Mirabeau. But it could be any of them. We're not sure who it is. It could be, or it could have been Belak, the one who did it in the plot. Kind of brings you in to try and do it. And then you find it's Belak, and actually Belak would probably work better. He leads you to the chapel that we kind of went into, and he offers you, well, join me, because that's gonna blah blah blah. And it'd have to be someone else, because then when you reveal it was Belak and you've got all the evidence, that brings you back into the assassins and Arno's character Mellows. Admittedly, it's basically the plot from Assassin's Creed 1. But you then have this character arc, whereas I think with Arno, you don't really have the character arc. You have him losing everything, and then he just comes back, and he's still not an assassin, but he's got Elise again, he's got his goals again, he's got his kind of his self-respect back again. I really hope that this isn't looping. I just have this sudden thought that maybe it's looping. But it's just that kind of... He lost everything and then immediately got it back after, like, one mission. Like, it completely defeats the point of him having lost everything. It almost makes more sense for him to have... Well, kind of the point where he loses everything is when he's in the Bastille. Admittedly, you can't have any missions within the Bastille because you're locked up. But you meet Belek. He brings you out, you join the assassins, and you've got a goal again. You've got some kind of life to you. So it kind of makes sense that that's kind of the plot we're going with. That's kind of the plot you're going with, but it's... You then lose everything kind of about 2/3 of the way through, and then you immediately get it back. And you're still going after Latouche for killing... for his part in being connected to the killing of De La Serre. You've got... He goes after Germain for his part in killing De La Serre. All these things are all kind of still going back. He's not learned anything, and then you have this thing at the end like he's learned something on this mission, and he hasn't. And I think... in some way, you could have had... Elise die maybe a couple of missions earlier, and instead of the stuff with Robespierre, you could have had Arnaud see Elise's death, realise why it does, why she died, stay with the assassins, and then that leads you to dealing with Germain. Admittedly, I quite like the end fight, to be fair. And again, that goes to the point of that is surely the sword or the sage's body are the connections, because I think wasn't that also in 4? Like they were looking for the sage? Or was that the Templars that were around at that point? I think that's what they were after. So I think there was a lot of things going on there that kind of could have lent itself to the world thing. Like, we still haven't really resolved much about the kind of... So, things we haven't resolved. The end of the world in 2012. I mean, admittedly, that's kind of wrapped up with Desmond's death. What data do the Templars have from Desmond's body? Is this from that, or is this from someone else? Because they've been doing things with other people and whatnot. So, who is it from? Are they? Where are they? What's going on? Did they get it from some other autopsies? No, there's a third point I was going to make. What's happened with Juno? In 3, she tried to possess her character in the modern times and failed and couldn't for some reason. Is she still in Abstergo computers because she wasn't in Rogue? What's going on there? Is there something? I mean, there are so many kind of little kind of things that they could bring in to be the world, be the kind of modern story, pull that out, and just kind of leave in a few hooks for kind of the next game or the next few games to kind of explore as the game as the kind of games advance. Because I mean, obviously you want to have a long. This is probably going to be a long series that they want to keep going and keep going back to, and having loads of more hooks or ideas that you can spin off into the modern story will probably make these more exciting. Open world. Just have a big open world and fill it with random stuff that no one's going to be able to do. I didn't do all of the random stuff in 2, like the feathers and everything. I think that's probably, and it's and same with 1. That had extra missions you didn't need to do, so we didn't do them. 2, Like every game, they seem to add a load more stuff, and this is probably the one so far with the most random kind of side things that just don't add anything to the story, to the plot. While these seem to be different, because then people would know if you're actually cycling. I don't think this cycles. I assume this is going to be like the other ones, where it's going to get to the end. And, I mean, we've not had the symbols of all the people who have things to do, and the thanks and the development babies and whatever. So I assume we're not at the end yet. Where was I going? Open world. So I think now there were some interesting ones. I like the murder mysteries. Asterisk. There were a couple that I don't think were as good as they could have been, or they weren't as clear as they could have been. There are some where where it was very obvious. I think you could do one or two. You could almost go. I think was it the first one today where we were in two areas and I knew it was the valet, or I had an idea. I had a very, very strong inclination towards the valet being the person who did it. And I think there's been other ones where it's like after one or two areas I've had a very, very good idea of who it was. They were quite good. I liked the riddles. In some way, I think they might have been better if there'd been a smaller area for us to investigate and pick up the riddles. Because sometimes you just go across the other side of the map and you've got to find something. And I think I'm kind of getting burned out on open world games. Because the open world games are basically now, here is a big map. The place you want to go is the other side of the map. There's a few little tiny things around, a few little random side things, but they're completely irrelevant. There we go, production babies. So they're completely irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. And so it doesn't add anything to the game. It doesn't add anything to the plot. And yet, here we are. So you end up in this position of just having so much silliness between the 2 points, and you could probably have a much better game experience, or a much better kind of gaming experience for us, a much better game, just kind of almost, I don't want to say objectively, but a more kind of solid, concrete narrative, if you just squeezed everything up, and then okay, it's ending itself. And so I think kind of the open world kind of fad that we've got at the moment is just, it's not great. Kind of treading some of the later Assassin's Creed games. Because it is kind of just look at a map, like, I'll open the map as soon as we get back.